Ayin Beis, Volume 1, Chapter 106 is where we're up to. Discourse 27, V'evan Azeis, Pasha Vayetze Tofresh Ayin Gimel, 100 years ago. And we're launching the third interpretation in Sefirah from the word Even Sapir, which shows, indicates on Behirus, clarity, illumination, crystallization. And in chapters Kuf Dalet, Kuf Hey, 104 and 105, that Rabbi Rashab has been explaining to understand this, understand the difference between Kalim and Levushim, containers and garments. And apparently the way he's explaining it is that in garments itself there are two levels. One is more like the containers, what we call Levush HaMechuber. It's an attached garment. It's united with the thing that it is dressing and clothing and revealing it. And you have a detached garment, Nifred, Levush HaNifred, which is detached and conceals that which is enclosed within it. And the difference began first by explaining that in chapter 104, explained the difference between the guf, the body itself, as a garment for the soul and for the faculties of the soul, and the garments that we put on the body, which means levush haguf. Clearly, the garments on top of the body are detachable. You can remove them, you can dress and undress. And their role is primarily to conceal. They're related to something outside of you. So you conceal yourself from others, from the weather, and so on. Adam in the Gan Eden, who did not need to who's not connected to other, it was detached from it, it didn't relate to an outside force, it was just an intimate internal force, did not need garments before the sin. For chet tzadas. And then there's the guf itself. The guf is connected. The guf and the soul, the body and soul become one. The guf itself is alive. He said in the next chapter that you actually see this life, even if you know movement, it's alive. And it's attached, and it's a revealing factor. Because without the containers, without the body and its limbs and organs, the soul's faculties have nowhere to manifest. So that's the distinction of Kuf Dalet. Then he says, just like Begashmi is Levush HaGuf, like it is physically, physical clothing, garments that we wear, jackets, shirts, pants, and so on, conceals, and the body itself reveals, meaning guf itself is a revelatory force of the soul. Same thing as Yuvan she has based in levushim beruchnis hanefesh. Same thing as the soul, the soul's faculties, the soul and its faculties also have two levels. And what he calls that, those are the two levels of the koiches hanefesh, the faculties of the soul, and his garments. So in other words, what we spoke before about the physical body and the physical garments that we wear on top of the body, now on the soul level, the soul also, the faculties of the soul are more like the guf. They are revealers of the soul's power. The soul, remember, they're not the soul itself. They're not atzmim because they're mishtana. They change, as he said. You can change. They grow. Even though the faculties themselves don't grow, but the fact that they're impacted by the growth of the containers shows you that they're not the core soul, yet they are revealers of that soul. They reveal the powers of the soul. Whereas the machshava, the bramaisa, our thought, speech, and action, even though they also reveal, but they reveal through concealing. Because the etzem esis, the tools we use to express ourselves, whether to ourselves, machshava, thought, or to someone else, or action, are fundamentally concealers. Yes, they reveal through the concealing, but the energy that goes into them is already a diminished one. He said, what about the faculties? They're also on a lower level. They also conceal the core soul. So he said, yes, they don't reveal the pneumius of the soul, and when they're active, they are concealing that core, but what they have within them is not diminished. They are essentially revealers. They're not diminishing, because the core soul doesn't enter into them. And he explained in the parentheses the different ways, the different levels. We said 3 different ways of how we explain the different maimarim, different discourses, how we explain these faculties, these containers. so to speak. So the three explanations, just to sum it up, because it's definitely relevant to the whole picture, is like this. The way he explains it here is that the faculties are like a lavusha mechuber. They're attached and revealers, faculties of the soul. These are the kelim of and those are the kelim of atzilus, are that way. The kelim of atzilus reveal the energies, like the faculties reveal the core soul. Another explanation is a higher explanation that the containers actually of atzilus are like separate levushim, not attached. And where do you have attached? That's the kelim of a chesed. That's another interpretation. That's not what he's saying here. What he's saying here would be more precise to break it into the inner containers, outer containers. So the inner containers of atzilus are like faculties. The outer containers of atzilus are like machshava dibra ma'isa, are like outer garments that can be detached. And then he hinted to, he said, one final, that the faculties are actually not even the containers, they're the energies. And the containers then would be, obviously, levushim, even the primis akelim. So it's really different ways how we talk about it. It all really comes down to what aspect we're focusing on, whether in container and energy, in the whole interface. But however you twist it, wherever you explain at what level, the bottom line is we do have two levels. One is it's actually the core soul is here, and think of the outside world here, two worlds. And then you have two interfaces. One, the faculties reveal the soul's powers, and they're attached and are revealers. And then you have the garments, machshava dibra ma'isa, are detached and can be changed. Like you said, you could change the words. You could say the same idea in different words. Whereas you cannot change the way your brain waves work, which is defined. Or how, as he said, how the Malchut affects the midas. An idea that awakens love, it will not be an idea that awakens yira, awe, or respect. And then he added that even though gam sheyesh cheluk gam ken beis, is the fact is you could also find different words to explain an idea. Different words to explain a certain wavelength. We're not talking about just different ideas to explain a thought, which that is obvious can be changed. You can use these same words, A, B, C, you can change it for something else. But actually different ways of expressing, he said that is number one, that takes a particular effort and it's going to diminish in some way. It has to compromise it somewhat. Because you can't really express it quite the same way if you're using a different type of wavelength or a different style. It doesn't express it quite that way. But it's possible to express. That's the thing. Whereas the seichel itself, the wavelength itself, is chesed or gvura. So yes, there is the element of it that you could manifest in a different way, but the seichel itself can never change. And the fact that by Shammai and Hillel possible changes, that's because of iskalos, not because it changes, the personality doesn't change, it's because personalities are interconnected. And therefore they can feed one another. Therefore Shammai at times could be lenient. Gvura can sometimes behave in a chesedic way.
Really, the Neshama's interaction with the world is through three different levushim. The faculties, Machshava dibra ma'isa, and the guf, right?
I wouldn't say it that way, but really? Okay. I'm not sure what you mean. It's in broad terms. I mean, what's the difference between what you said? I mean, I understand like this. If you're talking about the soul, has either faculties, it has garments, has machshava dibra ma'isa.
Right.
The guf is not relevant in this context.
No, it's to interact with the world. Though all those three are very, very relevant. It needs machshava.
Well, let's spell it out. I mean, the faculties need the body and its limbs and organs, eyes and ears.
Yeah, to interact with the world.
Okay, so
it's
I mean, I wouldn't put it that way. That's not how I would put it. I don't see three. The guf are the kelim of the guf is the way the faculties express themselves. It's basically keiches hanefesh.
The neshama has two levushim, which is the faculties and machshava.
I don't know. Three levushim. Machshava dibra ma'isa. I'm not sure what you mean by levushim. You see, you're using words. The words are very simple. The neshama has 10 keiches and 3 levushim.
Yeah.
Can't change that.
Right. One is like a levush nifra, one is like a levush.
So the faculties, right, are like expressive, are like a levusha mechuber.
Right. So it needs all these three in order to interact with the world.
You make the category 3. I just didn't accept that category. I don't know where you got the number 3. It doesn't say anywhere such a thing. I mean, why do you need to have this number? Why is this number so important? Why don't we distinguish? The way he explained it here is like this: that just like physically, there's a body and there's the garments on top of the body. Something spiritually, there's the faculties and there's thought, speech, and action. That's how it's explained here. So, what do you want to? What are you trying to? How are you trying to qualify that?
That it just remains in the realm of spiritual. If you look at it that way, but if you want to,
the soul is there's the core soul. Okay, right. It has faculties within it. Hold on.
You just said faculties within it.
Yeah, look, we learned there's the etzem nefesh has within it all the potential faculties.
No? That expresses itself through.
Then there's the 10 keches of the nefesh, chachma bina das. That's called levusha mechuber, as you put it. They express the powers of the soul. For them to express the powers of the soul, they need the physical body and its physical limbs and organs. Correct? No, not necessarily. I'm talking now that there's a keyach hariyah. You need an eyeball and you need the power of vision. Then there's another thing. Machshav dibur maisa is the way you express it to the outside. I mean, are we? Okay. It's. You can qualify it any way you like. I mean, there's a soul, faculties, a body, and machshava dibur maisa. Is correct?
Okay, no. So you're doing machshava dibur maisa after the body. Right.
Because you could be sitting and not doing anything. You could sleep and you have the faculties functioning. Machshava dibur maisa is already an active expression.
Only with the body do you have that machshava dibur maisa. Yeah. You can't have machshava without a body. You
mean to say if a soul in heaven has machshav dibur maisa, it does, but it's a different type. It's a much more spiritual type. Machshav dibur maisa are just forms of expression. That's what they are. You have, for example, you have the Eibishter. You say that from machshavte shel Kadosh Baruch Hu created souls. From dibur shel Kadosh Baruch Hu created angels. Remember, at the end of the day, and spiritually speaking, they're just levels of expression. Because we're using here these examples for kelim of atzilus.
It's just fascinating. Dibur the mashal. I understand the because it's a spiritual thing. Dibur.
Each has its strength and its weakness. I mean,
one neshama communicate with another neshama. There's no.
Who says communication has to be through word, through a mouth?
There are yeshivas in Gan Eden. There are yeshivas in Gan Eden. They learn.
Right. If you talk about it not physically, there's different levels. Look, dibur is it's an express. You have to limit the thought for you to express yourself. So in Ruchnis you could also say b'dvar Hashem shamayim nasa. When God used words to create the world, He's already concealing part of His thoughts. So Yehi Oyer is just words. Within it lies a lot of thought. And then we say l'mayla dibur chashiv kamaisa. Akim of shvosav hayva maisa. When God speaks, it's as if He creates. All this is, end of the day, what we have examples of it in our lives is just to help us understand the dimensions of how divine energy manifests. In other words, kelim of atzilus, what is their role? Are they like garments detached or are they attached garments? That's the key here. That's where he's going to. He's trying to explain all of this, to explain. In other words, machshav and dibur, as we understand it physically, at the end of the day, are really just two levels of revelation. Okay. So that's what we got here. So we go like this. I was just reading the last parenthesis. He said, even though there's differences in the words that manifest, that enclose the idea, this one speaks of these type of words, this type of words, which means they have different styles, different expressions, that comes from the etzem hus nefesh that's higher than giluyim. Now, nevertheless, people could say it in different words, you could express it differently, but it won't be revealed quite the same way. Whereas the seichel itself, not the way you express it, there's no changes. So that demonstrates that it is a attached and revealing faculty, force. Now he goes in Kuvov, we continue. V'adugma mizeh, and the example of this, Yuvan Lamaila. So remember, we have here, both physically, we have two levels of garments. The garments that we put on our bodies, which are detached and concealers, and we have the garment, the body itself is a garment. And same thing benefesh. We have the faculties of the soul, and we have the garments of the soul, which are machshava, thought, speech, and action, with the same distinction. Now, all this is going to be, every detail he discussed is going to be an example for how to understand kelim of atzilus, which is all an example to understand the third meaning in sefirot, which is behirus. So let's now go to the kelim of atzilus. What is their role, and how do they how do they express? Is it a form of attached garment or a form of detached? Chapter Kuvav, 106, page 204. We'll understand above the containers of atzilus, their role, their function, is not to conceal or to hide, God forbid. It's interesting, it says Chaz v'Shalom. Yeah, because Ki'im Tachlis in Yonim Hu Legalis Ein Sof. Because their purpose, their ultimate goal, their ultimate objective, is to reveal the divine, the infinite divine. As we discussed at length, if you remember what atzilus is. That's why it says Chaz v'Shalom. Because if the kelim of atzilus come to conceal, remember it said Gili Ahelim. If they come to conceal, which is really the role of kelim after atzilus, lower than atzilus, bri, yitzir, asir, to this world, here it comes to conceal. That there should be an independent reality, and we should work hard to retrace our steps. But in atzilus, God forbid that they come to conceal; they come to reveal. And that's why they're called sefirot. And here we mean sefirot, we're talking also the kelim, not just the eir. Remember before, it's an important qualification. Before the chiddush was earlier on in the discourse, was that not just kelim are the sefirot, that also eiris are sefirot. That also eiris have chesed and gvura and so on. That was the chiddush earlier. Now he's going the other way around, because there's also an opinion in Kabbalah that it's only the eiris that are sefirot and kelim are nivroim. Kelim are creatures, which means they're concealers. So there's all the three opinions basically. In Kabbalah there's the three opinions. When you say sefirot, some say it means the eiris, not the kelim. Some say it means the kelim and not the eiris. The eiris are more divine and shapeless. And some say, which is obviously the ultimate, that there's both. Which is the Arizal, and then Ayin Beis goes and explains how that's really both. So you have tziyur in eiris, but they are shapeless. And you have kelim which are shaped, but they're divine. So they're divine. So therefore, al shem zeh nikras sefirot lashon sefirot behiras. That's why the sefirot are called illuminating and clear, because they're revealers, behiras. If you would say only the meaning of sefirah from the word mispar, you could say mispar is a concealer, not a revealer. It just tells you the number. It doesn't really tell you. It's like they said, the bechina achreina. It's only the number of something. It doesn't tell you the quality. We learned that you could find the quality hidden in it, but on its own, it just tells you. Someone tells you this is 1 million items here. It could be 1 million diamonds. It could be 1 million grains of sand. So the number tells you very little. Even the number of the word sefirah from the word sipur, okay, there already is a story. So there's some revelation going on. But the bottom line is that you don't have that. When you say sefirah is behiras, clearly the sefirah is a revealer. Because it doesn't get clearer than that. Behiras means to reveal, to illuminate, to shine, to glow. Clarity.
One would say that the first idea we talked about spheres, that they would give the definition of sphere on the kli. And the second idea, the definition of sphere
primarily.
on the water.
So primarily, yeah, when we said mispar earlier, we said the mispar is primarily in Malchut, where the primary containers are. So that's what, because number means, quantity means more. Where there are more containers, the lower you go. The mispar of eiris is already a chiddush. It's the quality of something. When we talk story, yes, story was referring more on air. No, first of all, no. Story is telling more on kelim that are higher than atzilus, than malchus, the kelim of the higher spheres, which are less kelim and more air. That's what it said. The mispur is remember he said that mispur number is the elam hazeh, B'riyas elam hazeh, he said. The parentheses, he said. And story is already how it's sipur b'derech is gili elikuz ba'elamus. Basically, story is eris and kalim, and there's less kalim. Mispur is more kalim. Here, obviously, he's talking here. It's going to come down to be like this. In number, kalim are priority, and is more in the back end. More in the back end in this interface. In the story, the kalim and eris are more less equal. You're talking about the kalim that are higher than malchus, because even there's also a story. And it's really the story of the Eris, including the Eris Hagvulim to their source, even the story of Bligvul. So you're already talking much more Er, but it's still Kalim, meaning it's Eris and Kalim. And here you're talking much more Kalim as they are subjugated to Er. They're revealers. In other words, here the most subtle level of Kalim is, of course, sphere from Behiris, from the word clarity, third interpretation. So in other words, you could say it's like almost three levels in the containers. You could say there's the premise of the containers, the premise of the emtsai, the middle of the containers, and there's the chetzenis of containers. He hasn't introduced those three levels in containers, but that's a very critical component. So premise of containers would be, they're basically almost totally revealers. The middle of the container, emtsai, would be reish techshef, would be the teich, would be like the story. And the outer part of the container would be the number. So Malchus is primarily Chetzenis HaKelim. The Kelim before higher than Malchus, from Chochmah to Yesod, are more, I would say, Mtsoyis HaKelim. And then there's the Kelim as they are Pnimius, which is where they become the greatest revealers. That will ultimately be the three interpretations, the way I would explain it now. Obviously it's going to develop further, but this is where we're at. So right now, to understand this well, we're distinguishing between levushim and containers, because both of them are doing a function. So that's why that parenthesis in last chapter is so critical, because it comes down to what kelim of atzilus, what's their primary role. The answer is they have three roles. They have the role of being a number, they have a role of telling a story, and they have a role of total revelation. And remember, it overlaps. When they tell the story, that's also revelatory. Story is also revealing. But if you want to define Sefirah from the word behirus, clarity, illumination, so now we're talking that. So therefore he's saying Kelim atzilus are revealers, not concealers.
It's higher than Chochmah, the heroes, it's higher than Chochmah. You said it's...
Who said it's higher than Chochmah? I said, when you were talking to each other, I said it's the premise of the Kelim of all these 10 spheres. It's not higher than Chochmah. There's no Kelim higher than Chochmah. We're talking about everything within atzilus. Within atzilus, there's three dimensions of the spheres. You could say Chochmah has that premise because Chochmah has the least containers in the 10 spheres. Bina has more, and Malchus has the most. Moshem zenik l'shvir lashon behir. So Kamesh Kosev Kamara Evan Sapir Dmus Kisei. This is the end of Mishpatim. One of the visions they saw when at Mount Torah. Kamada Evan Sapir, like the vision, like the image of a sapphire stone, Dmus Kisei. That's what it looked like, the Kisei. The supernal throne looked like the image of a sapphire stone. What does a sapphire look like anyway?
I think it's green, no?
It's greenish.
Red.
Rubies are reddish.
Yeah, but this is also usually, no?
It says in Rashi there the colors of sapphire. I think it's bluish green.
Sometimes it says it's blue sapphire.
It also says Sampirin, that when Moshe from Shivrei HaLuchas he became wealthy because it was Sampirin, it says. Because the Luchas, it was not just stones, they were sapphire. Which explains actually very well, because the Aces were illuminating. Mem Samach Luchas B'Nesai Emdim. So it was a very revealing form. It was not like Aces Aksav, it's already much more, maybe he'll use these examples. Let's see. So Kamara Evan Sapir the Muskise, the Kamoy Evan Sapiru Evan Tev Hamazir To explain now what this pasuk means. Just like a sapphire stone is a beautiful stone, Even Tev, it's a precious stone, Hamazi, that shines. Kachal derech moshel, and as a matter of fact, the sapphire stone can be, it says when Moshe, we said Tzoyer Tasla Teva, that it was an Even Teva, that could be a sapphire stone. It gives off light. Is that correct, or just reflects light? I mean, there are stories. Avonim Tevis Margolius.
There was no light, so you needed the stone that gives off light.
So it gave off light, right? It wasn't just a reflector of light. So a sapphire gives off light, because definitely a diamond, for example, it bends the light in a certain way, so it looks like it sparkles.
Yeah, but it's still reflecting.
Right, but there are stones that give off light.
Not in reality.
Yes, there are. It's not correct what you're saying. There are for sure.
Give off light.
Yeah, they glow.
They glow. They may not be a big, they're not a bright.
Maybe radiant.
No, not a bright glow. I've seen it. I remember.
Yeah.
You have seen that?
You have the white stones, some of the white flintstones in the dark. You can see.
Right.
Today also you have, kids, sometimes you go to these parks and they give you these things that has a certain liquid in it. Okay, this needs to be looked at. I'm not going to...
Even when you wash, you have at night, you can see the numbers, it glows.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a stone. That can be a certain type of chemical. Fluorescent. I know what you mean, yeah. Some people wear yarmulkes that look like they glow in the dark. Certain colors. Fluorescent. There's fluorescent.
There are stones like that.
Luminescent. Fluorescent. There's another word. What's another word? Not fluorescent. What is it called? Like almost a ridiculous word that they use, that the clowns wear. Not fluorescent. Okay. She says, so just like a kachal derech moshel dmus kisei. So, for example, dmus kisei, the image of the throne, shei b'chinas hamalchus. That's the level of malchus. The ima yesh b'chinas hayeser achreina shebat atzilus. Even though she's the lowest level in atzilus, v'sheidish shemakar biyah shebat atzilus, and is the root and source of biyah shebat atzilus. Because malchus, remember, will become the kesser of the lower worlds. So malchus is the lowest level, and is the beginning of the biyah within atzilus. So it's the so-called bria within atzilus. V'shamu ikar inyan kelim, and there you have the primary containers of b'chinas agbolas davar b'chinas misper, and it's in a defined way, in a number. Commission is bar leil pedic pei hey in the first interpretation, chapter 85. Nevertheless, Malchus does not conceal and hide the energies of Atzilus completely. So here we're getting now into the core of it. So even though Malchus, compared to the other spheres, is the primary place of Kalim, is the beginning of Biyah, it's the root of Biyah, meaning of creation. So Kalim are very dominant, but being that it's still in Atzilus, it's also not a concealer. It doesn't completely conceal them. That's why, from Malchus, in truth, the worlds cannot be created yet from Malchus alone. In other words, even though Malchus is going to be the force that creates and carries the energy of Atzilus in a very tzimtzum, concealed way, but Malchus alone is not enough. That's why b'chinas yesh v'gvul. Malchus alone cannot create worlds that are yesh, an ego, a sense of self, and gvul, and defined. Like we said in the Kutei Shira Shirim on that pasuk. The Gama B'chinas HaMalchus, Nalayim is Malchus. Shoes. That even from Malchus, Haya'elam Mispashad B'li Gvul V'ketz. From Malchus, the world would still be extending without any limits and without any end. Gvul and Ketz. Ketz is like a Gvul would be something stops somewhere. Both. Gvul is a limit and Ketz is like a boundary. In order for the Yisavas, the creation, to be a Gvul, and he brings the Gemara, that every heaven is a journey of 500 years, light years, so to speak. Sandal. It's through the Malach sandal. Sandal is also a shoe. Sandal. Shul b'chinas nal ha'chefa es reva regel b'chinas Malchus. This is what it says in Likutei Torah. The Malchus alone, though it's still containers, it's still not the real alone can transmit to total gvul. What do you need? You need the malach sandal. Sandal is from the word like a shusha b'chinas nal. He's going back now to the garments. Remember we spoke about the garments of the body 2 chapters ago. He spoke that the legs, because they're the lowest part of the body, and they touch the earth, the tit v'refesh v'tit. So therefore those garments have to be the thickest. So now you see here on the nimshal that malchus alone is not enough. You need to have malach sandal. The malach that's called sandal. Malach that's actually called shoe, basically. Or sandal. Like the word sandal comes from sandal. It's a shoe, that chefe, that surrounds, that encompasses, that the most of the leg. So it protects it. So it's already not the leg anymore. It's now the shoe that protects. And from there comes, that's the level. It covers over reva regel. What's regel? Regel is malchus. And this is the shoe that limits it, right, that it shouldn't expand and bring the transmission in a form of gvul. Because malchus is still of atzilus. And atzilus, the main goal, male atzilus is behirus, is revelation, clarity, not concealment. That means through malchus, the energies and lights of atzilus are still radiating. And from that level, there cannot be yet a mitzias yesh. You can't yet have a real substantial yesh, a substantial being, literally.
It's like a tzimtzum mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all tzimtzum mechanisms. I mean, we'll soon learn what malchus is. Malchus is a very unique and very paradoxical force, because on one hand it carries everything from before, the higher levels. On the other hand, it becomes the interface to the lower levels. But on its own, it's still fundamentally still carrying. Remember, Malchus of Ein Sof, if you remember, still needs a tzimtzum arishin. Malchus of Ein Sof, even though it's the lowest level of the 10 hidden spheres, it's still not enough. You still need to have a complete concealment. So it's the root of everything that will come. I mean, and the simplest example would be back to the teacher and student, is that the teacher has prepared everything in his mind for the student. He's even prepared what words to use. He was mitzamtzim and concealed it all. But it's still inside of him, but right the second before it comes out of his mouth. Even as it comes out of its mouth, it's still the dibur of the teacher. And the student is biyah. So you need to have one final so-called concealment to really bring it in. Because if from the teacher, at last second, he can still start pouring out everything that he knows. It's still attached to his mind. So that final type of definitions, it says, okay, it's going to come this way and not that way, is the sandal level that he's describing here, from the Kutitei to Shir Shirim. So what is the Gilead B'chinas Malchus? So now, so we have here a qualification. Till now we were learning Mispar is primarily in Malchus, because in Malchus you have the primary Kalim, which means in Malchus you have the abundance, the quality, the volume. And now he's saying that even Malchus is one of the spheres of atzilus, so it has also the meaning of behirus, not to mention the meaning of story. So then what is Malchus exactly? What is it? Is it a revealer? Is it a concealer? So clearly he said now it's a revealer. So he's going to explain it now. The role of Malchus. They're all ultimate. Every interface is critical here. If you really map it out now he's discussing Malchus. We discussed Bina, remember a few chapters back, maybe Dover, Matech Dover. We've discussed Chochmah, we've discussed atzilus, we've discussed... I'm already, on a paper, I made a document of all the different pieces of the interface and which chapters discuss which. Because I think, as I said, I'd love to make an image map of the whole atzilus and then focus in on that part of the pipe. Expand it. You see pipes and say what, like a pipe. When you see how you make interface between pipes, when you attach pipes, it's a whole process. Yeah. So and then go through each place where the connections take place.
Click on it. And then
that would be interesting, right? So you can focus on, okay, let's see Malchus. Let's see Bina, Chochmah, Atzilus, Chesed, Ezeshir Sagnuzes, Gvul, Bli Gvul.
Divine plumbing. There you go. Cool.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I talked to a doctor recently who does surgery, and I said to him, how he tells me how you tie back together the nerves or blood vessels and so on. It's unbelievable because the way they're connected, it's tremendous. It's not just physical connections also. It's to do with enzymes and to do with chemicals, and it's not just, it's not like a pipe, you put it together. When I was a kid, I remember cassette tapes came out. When I between Gemaras, which was quite often, sitting, I had this mishugas. I would get those cassette tapes that tore, open them up, and try to reconnect them. And then when you hear the music or whatever, it's always found a little clash. Today, they call it splicing. You splice sounds. With the audio editor or video editor, you can actually. Real editing is that the kunst is to mix it. That you shouldn't see the split. That it should look like seamless. So that's our role: is to be interfaces, mediators. You think you can do that well? Two people who are completely disagreeing and figure out how to make a seamless connection. It's not so simple. So these are models. Atzilus and Biyah are pretty much in a disagreement about everything. And so is Malchus. Okay, so now we're looking at Malchus. So this is Malchus, the interface of Malchus. I think if you structure it this way in your mind, the whole Hemshech becomes really almost like an encyclopedia of interfaces, of each section, taking each section, and that's really what's going on here. That's why it shouldn't be disturbing when he keeps going back and say, 1 second, but here it says Kalim are chesed, here it's Kalim is this, and here is that. It all depends what part of the interface you're talking and what you're focusing on. So now it goes, Inna Gili de B'chinas Malchus, so what is the Gili of Malchus? Before we earlier said Gili of Malchus was Helen. So he says, the Hininei de Asara Mamores in Sefirah, the Malchus. Now it's known that the Asara Mamores is the 10 utterances. Let's be the Asara Mamores Nivra Elam, the Mishnah says, right? And Bereshis Nama Maimerhu. So that makes 10. Bereshis, Yehi Eir, Yehi Rakia. I don't even know if I remember them all by heart. Right? Then the Mitzidesha. Then there's the Himeidus. So we have there already 5. Then we have the animals, 6. There's of course man is the 10th. Right. But in between there's the fish. Maybe the fish and the birds. You have to basically see where there's a maimer, Yehi. Wherever there's Vayemer Hashem, is a maimer. So there's 10 maimeres that God used, 10 utterances, 10 expressions. Remember, we're going back now to Dibur, Machshav, Dibur, Ma'aseh. You're going to see how it all comes together. 10 maimer utterances with which God created the world. Where is the place of Asara Maimeres? That's the question. We know there's Asara Sadibris. That's Torah 10. We know there's Asara Sefirah, which we're discussing, and there's Asara Maimeres. Lula de Mistapina, I would say that Asara Sadibris is like Behiris. Aseret Sefirah is like the story, and Aseret Maimeres are like the Misper. But obviously they all overlap. So he says, where do they reside? The Aseret Maimeres, that's Sefirah is the Malchus. Shubchinas Dibra Elyon. Why is it Malchus? Why can't you just say it's Chochma, Bina, Das, and so on? Because Dibra Elyon, the speech, the expression of the divine to create something outside of itself, happens in Malchus. Chochma, the faculty is within you. You have Chochma inside your system, Bina, and so on. But Dibur, the expression of it to the next world called Biyah, that's Malchus. So when you say Asara Maimeres, you're saying the Sefirah, Chochma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gura, Tefes, Netzach, you say, as they're channeled through Malchus into the next, to the student, which in this case would be Bria. There we go. Right. There we go. So Yemer Al-Kimi, which is the first of the 10 Maimeres, or the second of Bereshis.
Because Eir is also chesed, right?
Yeah. Is that chesed Sheba Malchus? So Eir is chesed, but Vayemer Al-Kimi Eir. In other words, Eir, when God looked into the Torah, what does it say? Vayemer Al-Kimi Eir, Vayi Eir. So God looked into the Torah. There's Eir. God created. There's a Eir in the conceptual Eir. But the Dibur of Er, Vayemer Elokim, here, that's Chesed Sheba Malchus. And therefore, obviously, each one has one of the spheres. That would be, we'd have to map that out. Exactly which Maimer is which sphere. Okay, we know that Er is now Chesed. The rest we have to figure out.
This all takes place.
I mean, Rakia is definitely Gvura, because that's the split. And Teferis is Desha for sure. I think it is the days. And Yom Revi Netzach is the Me'eris. The rest you have to figure out. Adam, I think, is Malchus Sheba Malchus. Or maybe Kesher Sheba Malchus. Chachma Sheba. No, it's not Yisad. It's not Yisad. Maybe Chachma. Okay, whatever.
This is all taking place in Malchus of atzilus, right?
Yeah.
And before that, it's not called creation.
Not called Dibur. Right, you can. Atzilus is never called creation. The Dibur is the is what is creating. It's not yet creation. The Dibur is creating. Remember, the Dibur by Hashem is Maisa. His words create. Our words, we need still to do something.
But I thought that in atzilus there's no creation yet.
Well, that's what he said. B'yasha b'atzilus. That's what he calls it. There's no creation, but it's the Dibur of the Melech. The king is speaking, which will create. Malchus is the creator in this sense. Malchus carries the creative force. So think of it. A king declares, says, Yemir HaMelech, when a king decrees, it's as if it happened. So the decree is Malchus, basically.
Or the decree is Levush.
Bria is the result, is the product.
It's Levush of Malchus.
I wouldn't use those words here because it's going to confuse. Levush is a very sensitive word in these chapters. Which Levush you talk about? There's a lot of Levushim here. Well, let's see where he goes with this. He's going to spell it out. He's going there. Okay. Eina kavona shenira ki ilu hamayma nimshach misvidas achesed shebemalchus atzmei mamash chas v'shalom. Okay. He's qualifying what he's saying. Eina kavona. The meaning in this is not shenira ki ilu, that it appears as if it's a power of its own. He's qualifying. It's not malchus. It's chesed shebemalchus. Doesn't have any power of its own. Kilu hamaymer nimshach misvidas aches shemalchus atzmei mamash chas v'shalom. Shemalchus atzmei mamash chas v'shalom. You know what I'm saying? Eina kavona. 1 second. You have to say it like this. Eina kavona. The kavona is not shenira ki'ilu. He's saying that's not the intention that it appears, which it appears. When he said the words, so it's as if chesed shebemalchus is speaking. That's not the meaning. That malchus itself, mamash, is what he says. We go. Eina kavana shenira ki'ilu amayim nimshach misvidas achesed shemalchus atzmei mamash chas v'shalom. Ki'im, it's not coming shemalchus atzmei mamash straight from malchus, from the chesed shebemalchus itself. God forbid. That's just a gaz b'yadachir. It's only an instrument. Ki'im atzmus eidin se baruch hu. It's coming from atzmus eidin se, the core divine force of the divine. Meir harose al yedei sefirot chesed shemalchus sheyisav v'sa'er. Is that atzmus is radiating its reflection through the spirit of chesed in malchus, and through that creates air. He's just qualifying what he said here, that it shouldn't be apparent here. Now he goes on to explain. That's how it's a revealer. I would say this line. See, Eina kavona. It's not Eina kavona shenira. It's Eina kavona. It's not the kavona as it appears from these words. So, like basically a qualification. Ve'eina kli de b'chinas chesed shemalchus masteres klal aleidin se baruch. And the container of chesed within malchus, which creates oir, so the mamoris, does not conceal at all on the divine energy. She'yir nira chas v'shalom sha'ashpa nimshach masfira mamish. Okay, I have to qualify what I just said. I think I miss. Well, it's the same idea, but just a little different intonation. I see. I thought he's qualifying what he said. He's not qualifying his words. He's saying when Malchus, the chesed of atzilus, says he eir, it's not in a way that you think that it's a force of its own. It's clearly revealing to you that it's God at work. That's what he's saying here. That's what he meant. Eina kavana shenira. In other words, it's essentially what I said before, but it's more in the content of the thing. In other words, let's give you an example. When we look at what does the Rambam say how Avodah Zarah came to be? That they didn't see God and they saw the stars, so they realized the stars are God's tools. Then they began to say, you know what? We don't see God. The stars. So the stars became an end in itself. Instead of seeing it as God's tools and instruments, Then the stars are too far, so they created symbols on earth, trees and stones and this, and built monuments to each star. Then came the commercial side of it. The guys that said, hey, well, you know what, we can make some money off of this. So they became leaders. They'll tell you how those stars are channeled through this thing. In other words, the stars themselves don't show you that it's God. The stars, you can convince yourself that they're creators. They're not gili. They can be helam. If you're smart, you see in the stars that it's only gazim biyad chesed. It's only an axe in the axe man's hand. But we could look at something. If you get hashpah, let's say you work for somebody, and you think you're getting a parnasa from this person, you can end up worshiping him because the person conceals the source. In atzilus, that's not the case. That's what he's saying here. Chesed within Malchut of atzilus reveals that it's a divine. The divine is creating it. It's not an interface that is hiding its source. It's a mamutza machaber, not a mamutza mafsik, basically. That's the key thing he's saying here. Whereas Malchus and Bria may already have much more personality, and it can conceal that it's coming from somewhere. You can convince yourself that it's coming from Malchus itself. And that's not the case. That's what he's saying here. So, Ayin Kavon, I'll read it again. This means, when you say Yehi Eir, and God said, Vayemer Elokim Yehi Eir, it could be in a way that, okay, Malchus is speaking. No, it's not in a way that it looks like the Maimer Nimshach Mitzvah Chesed Malchus Atzmei Mamish Chas V'Shalom. That it's coming, God forbid, straight from Chesed Sheba Malchus Atzmei Mamish. Literally from Malchus. Ki im Atzmos Ein Soch Meir HaRosei Al Des Chesed Sheba Malchus. You can tell on that level that Atzmus is really radiating. It's just being channeled through this. Shisava said, "Ein akel de b'chinas chesed shemalchus misteres klal." I didn't say baruchu. She yinir chas v'shalom shashpon nimshach nasfira mamish. And the container of chesed and malchus does not conceal the divine at all. That it should appear, God forbid, that the transmission is coming from the sefirah itself.
Why is chas v'shalom say that?
Because chas v'shalom that's mamish avei dezorah. This is what the Sherish Mitzvah Tefillah he brings from the Shal Shus Harivosh, where the Baal Nigla asked the Mekubal, when you daven, and you davening to Sefirah? Yeah, because it could end up being that you're davening to a Sefirah, which is definitely not. Just like someone can say, I'm davening to the Rebbe. You're not davening to the Rebbe, you're davening to God. Exactly. And the Rebbe is a schutz from the Rebbe, and more than that, the Rebbe himself is bittul. If he was an entity, it would be a problem. He's representing. He's a Isha Lakim. It's like, oh, Keli. This is critical. Because this is Dr. Lang. I'm going to show you now that where we do need. Not everything is one.
You never said that.
Because anyway, I'm just using you as a scapegoat. It's not you. There's those individuals that think that everything is one. It's not everything is one, because nature is God, but God is not nature. That's the thing. So to say that a stone is divine, of course it's divine, but divine is not defined by a stone. So it goes one way, not the other way. That's the difference. Kalim, its goal ultimately is.
You have to internalize that. It's a very important thing.
It's critical because the point of the meaning, because you don't want to come to. At the end of the day, Achdus Hashem is critical. But remember, one of the big challenges, and this is like the Chiddush of Chassidus Chabad fundamentally, when the Alter Rebbe began to explain, and he says in Perek Zayin of Tanya, Sheikh Vamuna, they're not like those that said Simson Kipshute. Their reason for saying Simson Kipshute, as the Rebbe explains, is Mitzat Gadlus Hashem. Because you want to say God is apart from this world. How could you say God is one with Gvul, God is one with garbage? So you have to say it's like a king looking through a window. So before the Gra, this is a Sheish above. The Mishnah's Baal Mishnah Chassidim says this already. Because ostensibly, when you use your seichel, that's what it seems like. It seems much more bakovidik. For kovid. The Alter Rebbe is mechader that you're not defining God should not be understood in a physical way. What do you mean he's there, he's not here? So bottom line is, the question however is, how do you ultimately reconcile? We're not trying to say God is, God forbid, nature. You're just saying that nature is God, but not that God is nature. And then the Spinoza is the other way around, that God is nature, that's all, there is no God beyond, there's no Seviv Kalam. They make only Seviv Kalam. Spinoza makes only Mamala Kalam. The whole Chiddush of Chassidus is that Havayu Hu Elokim, that Seviv Iza and Mamala are one. But if you say Mamala Kalam, you have God is nature, nature is God. For that purpose, you can worship a tree. If you go the other extreme, that God is only Sefer Kalam, meaning only beyond, then the tree doesn't really get united with God. The tree remains a creature, and you can't really create a relationship. How do you have a relationship without so-called defiling the respect and awe of the sanctity of God being a separate entity? That's why you need Eiris and Kalim, because Eir represents the divine, Kalim represents existence, and there's a place where they meet. But it gets very subtle, because someone can say, 1 second, should you tell me Sefirahs are an entity? In other words, a Sefirah is the structure of existence, or a Sefirah is divine. That's why these three interpretations are critical here. That's why the whole thing of Kalim and Levushim. Because if, God forbid, the Kalim of atzilus would become concealers, then what do you have here? Then the interface is getting in the way. And you end up becoming an end in itself. You need to have them being transparent. But they also have to have an element of structure for the interface to work. So the question is, how does the divine meet the structure? Which goes back to the whole question on the table here. That's why this whole elaboration, that's why Haskalah alone is not going to work. You have to work and learn how your Keli becomes... Bittul, of course, is the secret. The bittul of the yesh allows the air to travel through it. Remember, that was always a condition. If there was no bittul... Yeah, for the flow of it. So the bittul of the Keli to the air reveals the air through the Keli. That's the key.
If you learn chesed the wrong way, that could come to make a mistake.
Of course.
The tree is divine.
Absolutely. That's why these qualifications are absolutely critical. Before the tree, even saying the sefirot of atzilus are an end in themselves.
Or even saying something holy, a gashmistic thing that's holy, you can say that it's God, you can bow down to it, it's holy.
That's why this is so vital. That's why I'm emphasizing it. So that's why the Chaz v'Sholem here. That's why it's the Chaz v'Sholem. It's not, you cannot give it any power of its own. At the end, in the Sheish Tefillah, yes, there's davening to Hashem. We all daven to God Himself. Sefirot are how Hashem expresses Himself. So it's a way I can identify. Remember, He said, "But begin dishtamuden bei." If you don't have a chesed of atzilus, there's no way you can identify with Eibush in any personal way. When you say chesed, He's doing chesed with me now, or He's doing chesed with the world. These give us tools. But it's exactly that. If the piece of art that we've been talking about becomes, this is a divine piece of art, yeah, but it's a divine creation of art coming from divine instruments that come from a source. That's why you want ultimately to have a seamless flow between bli gvul and gvul. Why do you need bli gvul? Remember, the story tells us also bli gvul. Because if you stop by gvul, you end up having this dichotomy. Either you're stuck in a gvul that doesn't have a relationship ultimately with God Himself, or yes, or the other way around. You're giving it too much value. You need the gvul has to lead you to bli gvul, or else the gvul will have too much power of its own. On the other hand, if it's only bli gvul, you don't have a dira b'tachtenim, you don't have a structure. Yeah, this is the key. This is the sensitive part. Absolutely.
A lot of people don't understand that.
100%. Look, the key that people don't relate, like you say, a Rebbe. I said this yesterday when I spoke to the woman. I said, you say Mashiach. I don't know what you're talking about. What Mashiach? Rebbe. Most people hear a Rebbe, you hear saying a human being that you have given divine powers to. They don't know what you're talking about, what you mean by Rebbe, all your feelings and everything you grew up with. A Rebbe is fundamentally the embodiment of bittul. Not his mitzias is what counts, his bittul is what counts. That's the key thing of a Rebbe. That changes the whole picture. Exactly. I didn't say that yesterday, but the whole point is bittul, and bittul cannot be bottled. Bittul is nitzchi in that sense, because it's not about. That's why he says, look, read mitzvahs minei melech derech mitzvah. It's a fundamental maimer. Where he speaks about the Ovid HaMelech. Why Shmuel didn't want to accept their request. Why not? The melech is a minei melech is a mitzvah. Some tasa melech melech. Because he saw that they wanted a melech for the wrong reasons. They wanted a melech for gaiva, for nationalistic purposes, a hero, a model, a lot of, more mitzias. And what you want to have a melech. The whole point of a melech is not to replace God, is to bring it to God, to be bottled. Malchus is bittul. That's the whole secret to it all. Okay.
It's just the opposite when we talk about yesh as a melech. It's just the opposite. How is it an essential part of the melech and we can't translate?
Well, Malchus works both ways. Malchus is bottle to that which is above it, and therefore it can. We can give Moshe Rabbeinu the category of a melech because he's completely bottled to the melech that is God, and he's therefore only an interface, only a transparent interface. If he's too much of a Metzias, or any Metzias, you have a problem.
Like one main melech.
Malchus is essentially the interface in the sense where God manifests as Melech means he's manifesting as a relationship with us. But Malchus is fundamentally a bittul dika level. Okay. Right? Okay, so in a kele the klei chesed shemachon the status klal al baruch hu shir chas v'shom shashpon nimshach masfira mamash. That God forbid should appear that the transmission is coming from the sefirah itself, God itself, mamash, literally. And that's why it's called sefirah. That's why you call it sefirah samalch, sefirah. Why? Because it's an illuminator. It does not conceal on the infinite divine light. Only thing is that through it, it's a channel through which, a transparent channel through which energy is transmits. To lower levels. Lahavis, to bring them into being, and to energize Elam es biyah, the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah. And he is, and she is Malchus, that is, unites, connects, mechaberes, connects the divine with the worlds. There we go. So what is its role? Is to connect, but its transmission and its revelation is what it reveals is what to get revealed through it is Ein Sof Baruch Hu. It doesn't have its own personality here getting in the way. Exactly. Remember he said before Dmus Kisei. And even though the level of Malchus is only a Dmus, it's only an image, meaning it's only an image, the Hainu. She'ena atzmis atzilus mizgal adei Malchus. Not that the core essence of atzilus reveals to Malchus. It's only an image, it's like a reflection of. And that's why it's called Kisei. Remember we said pasuk Kamada Evan Sapir the Mus Kisei. He's explaining this pasuk. That's why it's called Kisei. What's a Kisei? Kisei means the throne, but Kisei is made up of two words: Kos Aleph. Kos Aleph literally means covering the Aleph. It's like Kos Kisei. So that's why it's called Kisei, because the throne of a king is obviously not the king himself. It's already a step lower. And because the Gili Atzmis, the king himself, in other words, the core energy itself, it's only a form of a Dmus. A Dmus, as remember, is like a, what do we say, an image of, like we make a stamp, an impression. So it's a Dmus, the Selim is more of a first image. Dmus is already an image of an image. An impression, right? Nevertheless, even though it's a step below, it's only an impression. Nevertheless, through it is revealed the divine, infinite light. What does it mean it's revealed? It doesn't mean it reveals all the grandeur and all the higher levels. It means that through it is recognizable the hashpah of the divine infinite light. Remember he said earlier, he said that when the keches ha-nefesh are revealed, it conceals the core soul. That's true here too. Malchus is not revealing everything, but what it does do, but it's also not concealing. What it does have, it reveals. What does it have? It has the power to influence. The power to mashpia, the power to communicate. So that's a revealing force. It's a revelatory force. Again, I'm saying this again, and not revealing it all, but what it does do, it reveals that the hashpah, the transmission is coming from the divine. So Malchus is telling you this is coming from a divine source. What we know about the source, you need other levels to know all about it. But Malchus does that revealing.
The clear glass allows them. If it's just a clear glass.
Well, probably, yeah, because it's Sefirah Behiris, yes.
Everything goes through it.
Well, he's going to discuss that. Yeah, because look, there is a difference between how the clear glass is a chesed and gevura.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean everything. It means whatever shines through the glass. Not everything is sent to Malchus. That's the thing. It's like this. Let me put it this way: your machshava has a lot more than your dibur has, right? So, but what your dibur is revealing, it's revealing. It's just not revealing the things. The machshava didn't send into the dibur. In other words, let's say you want to say something to someone and you want to be Megal Tefach Mechasad Tzvachayim, reveal, but and very, very deliberate. You're going to say 10 words, you mean something much more. You're essentially not saying. What you said is revealing. Dibur is revealing. But the dibur is only revealing what the machshava informed it to reveal, not all that it has behind the scenes. That means Asar Mamor. When Hashem said Yehi Oyer, there's a lot more to those 2 words than just the words. But what we're talking now, the creation. We'll see. Let's see how he goes here. If not, we'll explain if it's necessary. But right now he's saying that Shanir of English Hashpoy made and say Baruch Hu. L'umas, what is he negating? A state that transmits and it doesn't tell you it's coming from Ein Sof. Like I said, the stars. Or like the classic story where the messenger decides to become the source. Where someone comes to you with a message, the messenger comes with a message, and everyone says, "Wow, that's a very important thing." And he forgets to mention that he came as bringing the message from someone else. He takes credit for it. Not davar amr b'shem emre. So that would be that the hashpah is coming to you, but it's not revealing its source. And a true shliach, ishluch shalom kamei, I'm coming. It's not me. I'm sharing with you what I was told to share with you. It's a big difference between the two. That's the difference between Avodah Zarah and not Avodah Zarah. In other words, God sends hashpah, let's say, through parnasa, through people. But you don't worship those people. That's God's blessing going through channels. That's it.
Machshava decides what dibur is.
I didn't say decides. I'm saying whoever decides, whatever machshava is sending to dibur. So that
sends to dibur, not Malchut sends to the 3 of them separately. Machshava sends to dibur.
Yeah, but that's not what he's saying here.
Oh,
Here right now, Malchus's dibur is carrying and revealing the source. I mean, here, machshava, I'm not sure where machshava is, probably the higher spheres.
Okay.
So bottom line is, it's clear and revealed that the transmission is coming from the divine infinite light, from God. So even Malchus is Sefirah. Now he's explaining here the word Sefirah is applicable not just to the higher spheres, but even Malchus, which is the lowest of the 10 spheres. Like he said, is the Biyah within atzilus. Is the one that creates. Nevertheless, it's still Sefirah, and Kolshkein. And for sure, the Madrega Shalamaylam Malchus, the levels that are higher than Malchus and Atzilus. Shayod Meir Gili Ein Sof Mamish, the Yeshem B'chinas Atzmis Atzilus. That through them radiates literally, in a very revealed way, literally the divine infinite light, being that they're the core of Atzilus. Malchus, we just said, is a kisei, and the mus kisei. It's only the reflection, an image, an impression of something that's only the throne, not the core. So for sure, the spheres that are the core of Atzilus, they for sure are a level of Sefirah, meaning behirus, clarity, transparent. He's giving now an example. When did we see this? Like now, when we look at the world, we don't see this at all. You look outside right now, and you look at the birds, and you look at the trees, and you look at the sky. You lift your eyes to heaven. What do you see? You see beauty. You see many things. You need an additional focus, an additional effort to say, I see the divine within it, like we learned earlier. But on its own, you can say, you know what? Sunlight comes from the sun. Most people say that. They don't say it's coming from God through the sun, and I'm thanking God for giving me a sun. You get food on the table. You don't say, Baruch atah Hashem, ameitzi lachem min haaretz. God is the one that brings bread out. You say, either you say thank you to the one who delivered it, or you don't say thank you at all, or you give credit to the farmers, whoever brings food into the table. So in other words, Malchus reveals that there's that source. So now he's going to explain, like when was this ever existent in creation? So he says, yeah, the beginning of creation. When Gilead and Sof was in this physical world, before the Chet Eitzadas, then this was apparent. In other words, atzilus type of consciousness was apparent on earth. That's basically the point.
Was it manifested in the physical also that the Ein Sof is Lamata? Or?
Yeah, that's what it means. It looks in the
The plants look the same. I know, but the plants look the same.
So yeah, but you saw in a plant, you saw divine. You saw like it was transparent. It was clear that it was a divine thing without, there was no selfishness. Look, when it says, what does it mean? And then Stalak Shechina, that's what it means. And that's how it will be when Mashiach comes. The world will be exactly the same, but you'll see that immediately that's the divine force in it.
I know, but the physical is different, or it's just the people interacting with each other?
No, the physical can be there, but the physical dictates, testifies to its author all the time. The Nigel Kved Hashem V'Ro Kol Basar Yaakov.
That means the creatures won't fight with each other.
Basar means our basar too. Everything, every part of every fiber of existence will be a complete transparent channel for the divine that's in it. You'll see the Keich HaPel B'Nifel. We say it all the time. If you're the Kopal Kata Palta, how do you envision that? Tell me.
No, we'll realize that the
We realize now too. Tell me the difference what we realize today and realize.
Those who realize that don't fight with each other.
Those that realize you think is like Mashiach for them already.
Yeah, it's
no. So Mashiach will only be for those that don't realize.
Of course he will.
No. When Mashiach comes, it will be everybody.
So explain the difference. Not everybody. You tell me right now there are people that mamish like by them as Mashiach is here.
Tzaddikim, yes, there are tzaddikim.
No, even they.
For them there was no churban because they're living in that.
They're more revealed, but it's still golus. Still golus. Tell me for us. So, one second. Right, exactly. So you tell me. You asked me a question. So you have to envision what would be the difference. What would be the difference? How would we look at this table? If Mashiach, the Gilead and Sof is right here in this room. How would we see Gashmis? That's exactly how the Rebbe means to open our eyes. That's what I believe it means. Envision that, and you got your answer. I can't say we can envision it completely, but I think you can envision some of it. That's why we have all these examples. I'll give you an example where you can envision it.
Yeah, you have these watches that are transparent. You can see.
No. I'm talking personal. You're talking me technical. Personal. Where do you have in your life that you're living in a way like it will be when Mashiach is here? You know when? No. Most people are selfish. Come on, who are you kidding?
I'm talking right now, sitting here learning. What do you think that? Why? I'll tell you even better. You know that when we're sitting here, how much is cut out? How much?
Okay, I agree with that. So we're good. It's a good example. When you immerse yourself in something and you have a geschmack in it, the geschmack, dafke geschmack, and your whole passion is involved, and nothing else is happening. Like the Rebbe would say, you don't even hear the phone ring. The Rebbe would say that. There you have an example. You're doing the same thing, your own body, but you see, you think it's a magic thing. You'll suddenly see something going out of the table. You'll stop looking. Right now, we're conscious of everything. When Adam Achav in the Gan Eden, when Alakus is Begoli, you don't think of yourself as an ego. Oh, me, and I want to see Alakus. It's just a natural thing. It's like a fish in water. It's Malchut Deis Hashem. You are doing what you should be doing without even an effort. Today, you have to say, you know what, am I going to go learn or am I not going to go learn? Am I going to sleep longer or am I not going to sleep longer? Or you know what, I'm going to go to a Fabrengen. I'm going to have Elokus, a taste. That alone already means you're not it. When you're it, you are one with it. A fish doesn't get wet. It is wetness. Like water doesn't get wet. So right now the world is a world of object, of Gavra and Chefza. When the Gavra becomes the Chefza and the Chefza becomes the Gavra, you know you're there. Now we have tastes of it. You know when? When you're completely immersed with your children, with learning, with anything, with Hamifta. Obviously, if it's Kedusha, there could also be a Chaman al-Islam immersed in something that's the opposite. Yeah. But if you're completely immersed, and I mean immersed, I don't mean to Yetzer Zayin, and there's nothing else there, there's a union that goes on. You have it sometimes, you get so immersed, you don't even realize you're tired or hungry. So that's a taste. Imagine the whole time being that way. It means the whole time, not that you need to be, like people say, but I don't really like that. It's really too much. That means I don't have any of my own agenda. I can't go on vacation. They say, you won't want to go. That will be your vacation. It's not like, oh, I'm doing this to satisfy my Yetzer Tov, and now I can go do the rest. It's like the guy that says, like I said, he goes to sleep in order to not sleep, to be up. You can't do that. You can't go eat pizza in order to then now we finished our fressing. Now let's learn. It doesn't go that way. The orange juice, or the Tzemach Tzedek said to the Jacobson. He says, "Besser daven sleep, besser essen sleep daven, and we daven sleep essen." Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely have a taste of it. The more you do it, the more you're involved. That's how it is. So what Bechilas Abriya? What was there? Gilead in Sof Lamata. Like Moshe Kosov. How do we know? It says Ela told us Shemaim v'Aretz Molei Vov it says mole with a vav, meaning tell this with two vavs. Yeah, no mole meaning tell this mole vav. There was a right. You could write tell this in chesed, missing a vav. She yigili b'chinas vav. Shahaya yigili b'chinas vav the shem avaya. Why is it with an extra vav? Because the vav means there was a revelation of the vav Hashem avaya, which is transmission. And that's why there was Gilead and Sof. The Yud Kei Vav, the Vav is Megal, it transmits. It's the Kav. Then he adds a parenthesis. Okay, who is our resident parentheses? Okay. Okay. You just have good eyesight, or you look ahead?
I look ahead. Usually that's not it.
Okay. In every chapter, we could have someone prepare us how many parentheses we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so here's the parentheses. V'gam oz hoyagila de Malchus. And then also, so the beginning of creation, it's true, was the Gilead of Elikus in the world, but it was also then through Malchus. Raksha b'chinas Malchus gam kem b'chinas Maimer HaGodel is what I would think. That's a Rosh Hashanah's. Moed HaGodel. Sorry, Moed HaGodel. Wow. Okay. Beautiful. That's what he's saying. Before Miyat HaLavona. Because Malchus is Lavona. So he's saying now, remember he just said now that Malchus is Sefirah because it reveals. And definitely the core of atzilus, the higher spheres of atzilus are Sefirah because they reveal the divine. And he's saying this was how it was in the beginning of creation. So literally, without the parentheses, you could say, okay, before beginning of creation, before the sin, the Gili was from the 9 spheres that are higher than Malchus. So he says, no. It also went through Malchus then. Even though Malchus is the lowest level, but then Malchus was on a level of Moed HaGodel. Remember, before the Miyut HaLavana, before the diminishing of the moon, both of the luminaries, yeah. Meaning that Malchus was Aspaklaria Meira, which is we used to say in the Bar Mitzvah Maimer, which is actually not an accurate translation, because that means a magnifying glass. And the Rebbe wrote, Rabbi Weinberg, because Rabbi Weinberg did that's beferish, not that. Maybe. Because Aspaklaria Meira, you say electric glass means illuminating magnifying glass, which means you're not seeing the thing itself, someone's magnifying it. And Aspaklaria Meira is the opposite. It means there's no block. It's not magnifying, it's not diminishing. You're seeing the thing itself, meaning there's no blocks. That's what it means. Aspaklaria She'eina Meira is what says other Nevi'im, the other prophets, they prophesized like through a shade, or through a veil, or through a concealment. Aspaklaria is a glass that Einamira, that's not illuminated, like not opaque, or let's say tinted or something. In other words, right? Aspaklaria says Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Misnava like Aspaklaria Meira, which means like he saw, like we said before, a clear pane of glass. Yeah, Zeh and Koi, exactly. Zeh, I see it. Koi, it's like you said, the mus, like. So he's saying Malchus, which was the mus later after the Chet, was there in a state of Aspaklaria Meira. Malchus Gili b'chinas atzmi da atzilus. And then Malchus revealed the core of atzilus, not in any diminished form. Not like Dibur. Dibur also reveals, but it only reveals a diminished element. Here, the core. And it's explained elsewhere, the yesh the kamoi b'yisavas neshamas akshav. That we can say, just as the bringing into being of the souls today. That also, as they are nivra, the neshama comes into a body. It's a nivra. It's a creation. I'm sorry, no. The neshamas themselves are creation. Nevertheless, they're divine. They're literally divine. Kamoi Kain, that's what it says elsewhere. Similarly, before the Chet, before the sin, in the beginning of creation, the entire creation through Malchus would also have been, the whole world would have been that way before the Kitrug. Kitrug means the complaint of the Levana, which led to the whole diminishing of the moon. Before that complaint, what would have been? Everything would have been divine in that same way.
Everything would have come through the Malchus. After the Kitrug.
Everything would have come through Malchus, but Malchus would reveal the divine, not in the way it's now.
Yeah. After the Kitrug became a less. Not everything.
No, remember he said Malchus even today reveals, Malchus atzilus reveals that it's divine. But it doesn't reveal the core of the divine. It only reveals a reflection. Before the Kitrug, before the beginning of creation, it would have been completely transparent in that sense. He's distinguishing between Malchus now and Malchus before the sin, so to speak.
Is he talking about the Kitrug, or is he talking about
It's all evolves one from the next. There's the Tzimtzum, the Sefirah Hakelim. Kitrug HaLavana is a Lavana's complaint when it says a king cannot have two crowns. Kitrug came on day 4. The Kitrug came on day 4, and that came on day 6.
Oh, so that was the cause of the Alila.
No, the cause came from the Sefirah Hakelim that caused the Kitrug. And the Sefirah Hakelim were caused by the Tzimtzum Arishan. If you want to find the culprit, go to the Tzimtzum Arishan. That's where you should go. If you want to punch someone out. If you want to blame someone. I once wrote a whole article about this called "Is the Tzimtzum Stupid?" Because they used to say, "Is the economy stupid?" It's to find who's to blame. Tzimtzum Arishan is definitely to blame. But once you get to the Tzimtzum Arishan, you're going to find out that Tzimtzum is going to tell you, go to the one who put me here. Lech le'uman shasani. Because the Tzimtzum is also not its own agent. So, ultimately you got to blame God. He like the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death comes to God and says, why did you create me? My miserable life I'm going to have. Everyone's going to blame me. He says, God, don't worry, God, no one's going to blame you for death. They're going to blame a heart attack, the doctor, the cancers, the diseases. They're never going to blame you. Right? That's how it is. Okay, so now let me explain what this means. He's saying now Malchus of atzilus also reveals that it comes from the divine. He said it clearly, but only that it comes from there. And the reason we don't feel it is because there's biyah afterwards. By the beginning of creation, Malchus would have revealed not just that it comes from the divine, but the divine itself. And the worlds below would have also received that. So Gilui Elikus, we would have known that there is a God in everything. Now he's saying that even after the Kitrug, again before the sin, the tree of knowledge, there was a divine revelation. Like the Talmud says, Medrash says that the Adam was able to see from one end of the world to the other because there was no physical resistance.
Can you imagine it?
It was all transparent.
They didn't have the Kitrug. What an Marisha would be saying. I can't even conceive of anything more at that point. Which, by the way, we learned about earlier. In other words, it would have been revealed the the light that was created in the first day. So we talked about Vayhi a chesed coming through Malchus. So that would have been a light, a different type of light that we have today. That means the Gili, the Eira Keser would have been radiating, because the Yom Harishon is the Gematria. The Yom Harishon, the first day, is the same numerical equivalent as the word Keser. 620. On the Medrash, on this pasuk, will tell this Shemaim V'Oretz, Shavov, the Vorim Nechsuru Adei Chet, Eitzadas. The Vov that was there until this, when it was Mole, when it was complete, and the world was divine, could have been divine, 6 things disappeared. Nechsuru, were taken away through the Chet Eitzadas. So clearly from this we see from the Medrash that before the sin there was these 6 things were revealed. The Vav that he spoke about earlier. Well, this is all back to the Malchut of the Arizal.
That's strange because the Vav is really Amshachah. It represents Amshachah, not the 6 numerical value of 6.
That's a difference. So it's 2 different things. And there's Vav Dvarim, yeah, 2 separate.
It's meaning right. It has
multiple meanings.
Well, why is there 6 things? It's always because 6 things is Amshachah Vav. Besides, there's also the number and the. Well, but the Arizal also has a sefer called the Kutatera on the Parshas. That before the sin, the entire cosmic order was on a higher level. V'haya oz Zoh u'malchus b'mokim ava, Abba v'Ima. And Zoh and Malchus, like he said now, were on the same level of what today is Abba v'Ima, Chachma and Bina. Shahaya Vavkei b'medreges Yudkei. The Vavkei, here's how it works. Chachma is Yud, Bina is Hey, first Hey, Vav is Zoh, the Midas, Chesed through Yisod, and the last Hey is Malchus. So he said, the Eilat told us, he says the Vav, that's Zoh. The Zoh would have been down here. Now in the parentheses, he's explaining now, according to the Arizal, that Malchus, he said, right, he just said earlier, Malchus would have been then, the Moyer HaGadol, would have been like the sun. So Malchus would be the same level as Zoh. The Zoh is the sun. Now he's going even higher. And then that revelation would have been on earth, we would have seen the divine. So we'd have the level of Vav. Now he's going even further, that actually Zoh and Malchus would be like Chachma and Bina. So Vav K, Midas, and Malchus would be like Yud K. That's how high it would have been. So obviously it makes sense why Keser would have been revealed. Yeah. And the same will be in the future. Because Moshe Kosev by Yemahu Yiyeh Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad. What's Yiyeh? Yud-Kei. Because the Vav Kei, the last, will become Yud-Kei. So Yiyeh means also future, there will be, but it also means the Yud-Kei. Yeah.
So it'll go up to 30 instead of 26.
And being now Malchus, because Malchus will be on the level of Bina, Abba Ima, the mother, so the daughter will be like the mother. Yeshlemer, we can say Malchus So let me say that through Malchus will be the revelation of Vav. Yeah, but I'm talking about before the chet. Yeah. He's going back. Malchus was in the like he says in Arizal, that was the Kedma that was in the level of Bina. Yes. Well, Zoh would be like Chachma and Malchus like Bina. That's what he's saying. Yesh leimashad. Yeah, Malchus Hoya. What did I say? Yeah. Okay, man. So Malchus Hoya was the Gilead B'chinas Havav B'Gilead Mamish. It was the revelation of the Vav B'Gilead Mamish. I don't know the logic of that, because the Vav comes from Albina, maybe, because Eim Abonim. Yeah, maybe that's the reason. What Bina is the Hey. Why is it the Vav? Okay. That's why he's comparing, he's saying that's the Medrash. Why the Chet, in other words, before the Chet you had the Vav, because Malchus was on the level of Bina, so therefore you also had the Amshach. Bina gives power to Zoh. That's what I would say means.
But maybe he didn't have the Vav Kebachal, because everything was on the level of Yud Kei.
Yeah, but there was still Zoh was on the level of a higher level. But there was a Zoh and Malchus, they were just on a higher level. Remember, Yud Kei was probably also higher.
They were like
everything was elevated.
The 10 things of...
Let's put it this way, the transparency was there was no concealments. What time do we have?
It's like the Asura meters of atzilus. They were all on the same level.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
The
Asura meters of atzilus. What was that called again?
Oh, he's going back now to that. Okay. And that is what Adam Arishan, that Adam, before the sin, did not need any garments that concealed. That's what he said. There was no zulas. That's good. He's connecting it all. So Adam didn't need garments that concealed because the divine revelation was in the world. Especially to Adam, not just in the world, but Adam specifically, even more than in the world. Kasnus Eir. Kasnus Eir means a shirt of light. Eir can be written with an ayin, which is a shirt of skin, or it is leather. It is also skin, no? Skin.
But in the context of a jacket or the clothing.
Or about a shirt, a regular shirt, is not leather.
So where do you have a shirt?
Okay, Kasnus Eir. But anyway, bottom line is by him was Kasnus Eir with an aleph. His shirt was made out of light. So here you have a shirt. So kalim are transparent transparent. That does not conceal it all, only reveals. So the parentheses basically put things into a more context of what exactly were the dynamics that were going on with Malchus. The bottom line of all this is that we had a taste of this revelation before the beginning of creation, before the sin, before the chet. Whatever the amount of time, doesn't matter, it's not quantity. Now another time that this happened. By Matan Torah. Shegilei and Sof Lamata, that had the divine revelation below, atzilus Lamata, which means that atzilus literally was here down on earth. The revelation of atzilus for that time period. Like it says in the first chapter in Sukkah, the Gemara 5a, so it says that God descended on Har Sinai l'mayla masar tvachim, higher than 10 cubits.
He didn't go lower.
Right. That he went down, but he didn't go, but he remained higher than Asar Tvachim. That's why the Rabbi says Lamata Asar Tvachim. Huh? Hand breadth. Right. Cubits is Amma. Hand breadths, is that what it is? Hand breadths. Okay. Tvachim. Lamata Asar Tvachim. A tefach is approximately around 1.5 inches, right?
Tefach is four fingers.
So
2.5, 3 inches.
2.5, 3 inches. That's how much?
3 inches.
Not 1.5.
Maybe it's even more.
Yeah. It's not tough.
Yeah, tefach means that. Tefach means that.
Yeah.
So tefach is at least
4 inches.
4 inches is a tefach. Okay.
How do you know it's a really small shear?
Okay, so it remains above 40 inches. Is that what you're saying? 30, 40 inches.
Yeah.
So how much is 30, 40 inches?
I think
That's 3
38
feet.
is
It's around 30 feet. 3 feet.
I think 38.
So okay, so let's say 3 feet. So God didn't come here; He just came till here.
That's why an Arab has to be. We keep it at 38. That's the maximum.
And
38.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what it says in Gemara and Sukkah. The man says, what's a sort of tvachim? Why? Ve'hen sefirot is atzilus. That's what it meant, because he remained in the domain. The sefirot of atzilus. So, which one of the sefirot atzilus? Below the tvachim or higher than the tvachim? It says that they remained l'mayla masar tvachim. He meant so that.
It means it's represented that he
Explain, yeah.
in the Asar Tvachim in this Sefirah of Atzilus.
But the God came down on Har Sinai.
Yeah.
But he came l'mayla masar tvachim.
No, but that's not what he means over here.
That's Atzilus.
What does it mean?
It means that he remained in Atzilus.
Atzilus came down.
Atzilus came down.
Yeah, that's what he means. Okay, so it means that Atzilus came down. That's why I started tvachim. In other words, he came down as Atzilus. Atzilus came down to earth. For who? This is what it
Atzilus is revealing, yeah?
revealed. Yeah.
Use the word Lashon
The level, the dimension. Dimension, basically, essentially, Atzilus is transparent divine. It's the structure of existence, but you see everything as divine. That's what it means. Like Mishnah.
Can say that again, just one more time?
For who Azal? This is like what Azal say, but Mechilta in the Medrash, Mechilta Hirchin HaKadosh Baruch HaShamayim. He spread out, spread out like sheets, the heavens over earth. That's what's happened by Matan Torah. Like it says elsewhere. That means there was a descent and the transmission of the 10 spheres of atzilus lamata, where usually we would only have fire, water, and all the elements of the world, and we have to deduce and try to figure out where's the divine. Then the whole world was radiating with the divine. That's why it says that no, leitzipra of the birds did not chirp. And the whole world recognized for a moment that there was a divine revelation going on.
The dogs in that park, and the animals
Right.
But only
There's flisha, only temporary.
collapsed. No, everything else was still
Yeah, even the non-Jews came running to Bilam, what's going on? So he says, Hashem eiz la'amayitain.
But only the only ones that
The ones that, when they heard that Sadibris, that's what
only
happened.
the Yidden collapsed.
It's possible that Har Sinai itself didn't come into Kedusha because Taki didn't go all the way onto the Har Sinai.
And that's one reason, yeah. And also it was temporary.
Yeah, but the fact that it's temporary, it's also this Kedusha doesn't Nakoim.
No, Mishkan was also wherever they traveled, the Mishkan didn't create any Kedusha in the Adama and the Afar. There's different levels. This is explained. I mean, this is about the levels of holiness. In this case, definitely not. That means that since there was the descent and the transmission of the 10 spheres of Atzilus below, that's why through this was mamish, the revelation of the divine here on earth.
So here is taking the shot that it actually came down, not only stayed up of Esa. Esa means Esa Sefirah, doesn't mean Esa Tvachim.
Yeah. Which also explains another thing. What does it mean? Talk about physical space. It's all ruchnistic. What does the Gemara mean even? That when he came down and like what you saw him here and didn't
he was hovering, he didn't actually touch the ground.
Yeah, but what it means really is that he remained in a...
Sometimes you see a cloud, it doesn't actually go all the way down.
I'm saying this type explains it much more because it's a ruchnistic dimension, not a gashmistic. Because before what was he? He was in the sky, not on earth. He was hidden.
So he had to go at Giloy.
Yeah.
I should ask, isn't the main in itself, the cloud, that's what the Gemara speaks about? If for Shabbos, for example,
it's a Malchut. Yeah.
So why?
The Shusarabim is only up to 10 Tvachim. Above that is a Malchut.
So what's the over here?
He's not talking halacha here. He's talking here spiritual.
The concept.
It's another domain. It's another entity. Under 10 Tvachim is considered the part of the earth, closer to the earth. So more atzilus.
And higher than that.
Higher is already more ruchni, more. It's just a representative in Kashrus, I think.
When the Rebbe says Lamat Masar Tvachim, he wants to say to bring atzilus of Lamayla Masar Tvachim to Lamat Masar Tvachim. Right, exactly. I agree with you. I think that's what he means. He means that it came all the way down. The earth was elevated to the level of Lamayla Masar Tvachim, essentially, to the atzilus. I'm sorry. And this is what it means that the containers of atzilus are sefirot or behiras, that they are spheres. They illuminate, they shine and illuminate, and they're transparent. Because through them, the divine is revealed. Through them. They're like the instruments that reveal. So you can have, I said in my class yesterday, you can have the artist takes a paintbrush, his instruments, and he creates art. So clearly the art is a product of the artist, and the instrument is the tool that he used to create it. But you look at the instrument is a concealer. Someone looks at the instrument, you take the instrument, you can't do anything with it. You look at the instrument, you don't see all the power in it. But imagine the instrument here, the sefirot. The instrument also has an element of story, but also has an element of behiras. That the instruments themselves reveal the art, the artist. So that's what the point is, that the sefirot are not just tools and instruments, they are actually revealers. The kelim of atzilus, in other words, reveal the divine. Before he spoke how it is today.
Why can't you say that the instrument is like the guf?
You could, who says that's where he's going to go now?
You're saying that the instrument is like a double shachutz mimeno.
It's definitely the instrument, because that's exactly, the kelim are a separate thing. It's not the etzim neshama. Fine, you could say it's like the guf. So what? That's exactly. But a guf. No, I wouldn't say that. Well, instruments is the same. I mean, well, that's it. He's going to say now. Look. Hold on. Look at the next line. That's why the sefirot are called tikkunim. He's going back now to the beginning of chapter 104, where he said tikkunim. What's tikkunim? They're levushim, takshitim, jewels and ornaments. They're called tikkunim. Because through them, in them, and through them, illuminates the divine infinite light in the world. Which is the ultimate purpose of the emanator, the source, that there should be the divine revelation in the worlds. It's a very fundamental chapter. He's describing the process of how the divine gets revealed, the beginning of creation, Matan Torah, and through our Avodah today. When he continues in Pasuk Elyo, so what does he begins? He says, what is the lashon there? He says, "Antu dafikas eset tikunim v'klin luhun eset sefirah." He, afikas, dispatched or emit 10 tikunim, which we call 10 garments, which we call 10 spheres. Then later, as you read on, it says levushim. So he explained earlier, because these are the levushim that are connected, like jewelry, takshitim, not garments that conceal. So later, what he says in Pasuk Cholyoni, what he says, "Mashenka levushin she'omer lekam levushin tekinas loon," meaning to the spheres which are called tikunim, he now prepared a set of garments. Tekinas loon, he
He fashioned garments for the tikkunim, which were the spheres. Hey mastirim ala eris va'kelim. They're concealing the energies and the containers. That's why you don't call them spheres. So when he says in Pasuk Elyon, he says, Antu dafikus eser tikkunim, karina lun, that he calls eser spherim. By levushim, he doesn't call that eser spherim. That's already levushim that he placed on the body, so to speak. Like, for example, the garments on the person that we spoke earlier, which their role is to conceal and to cover the body. The same thing as levushim lamaila, the garments above. The levushim, like machshava dibra maisa, they are to conceal and to cover on the energy. V'gam levushim atzilus u'kamay levush hachashmal. And also the garments of atzilus, like levush of chashmal. Now we go back, we mentioned sandal. Chashmal is another level in atzilus. These are terms also chashmal used in Yecheskel, in the Merkava when he sees his vision. So he uses chashmal. In Hebrew today, chashmal is electricity. Why? Because electricity is like what he says, he calls it chashmal. So it's a level, but it's a levush. Chashmal is a garment already. Shemakifu malbish lezun. Chashmal, which hovers above, which surrounds. Malchus, right. So sandal is the garment. Remember, he spoke garments of different parts of the body. So sandal is the garment of the feet, like the shoes.
Right.
Chashmal is the garment of zah, or zun, and then there's garments also of the head. Okay, so chashmal shemakifu malbish, and they are surrounded, and they dress and they enclose zun, which is zah nukva. Mizdadeyem, the tachas ragleim, from their sides, and also below their feet. Ime yesh kedusha gemura, even though chashmal is complete kedusha, total kedusha. Ubeitz Chaim Shar Mem Gimel Perek Aleph, and Eitz Chaim in 43:1, Gate 43, chapter 1. Shalavushim atzilus nikra lekus v'kedusha. It says clearly that the garments in atzilus are also called godliness and kedusha.
This is another level besides the kelim.
He's talking about levushim. He's asking a question. You just said that the levushim are not even in atzilus. Are not, they're concealers, but even though it's real kedusha, vehem mebchinas chitzeni is bina, and they come from the outer dimension of bina, chashmal, and those levushim. Like it says in Terer in Truma, v'ivdila pareches. That's the pareches, is the curtain, is like that level. Okay. So they're kedusha, they're holiness, but they are garments that enclose the containers, and malimim, they cover up, mastirim, they hide, and mastirim, and they cover up over them. Because they're not the illuminating clarity and transparent forces of the containers are. And therefore they do not get connected as much. Like he said, levush, it's a garment that's not one with, it's somewhat detached. Kolkach. Ima es sefirot, with the 10 spheres. And that's why they conceal them. V'hini you do in the parentheses. V'hini you do, now it's known, the sheresh levushim hema meir makif, that the root of the levushim, meaning even the outer levushim that are detached, are from the transcendent energy. L'chen ha-makif sheda ala levushim. That's why makif is sheda ala levushim. So when you wear a garment, there's a makif on it. That's why it says you're not supposed to take off 2 garments at once, because there are 2 makifim. Okay. And being that makif, as soon as you say something is transcendent, the makif, it's concealed. So he's explaining, even though the root of the levushim are actually from a very high place, makif, but makif by definition is concealed, not pnimi. Pnimi is immanent and eternal energy. Therefore, also the product of their makif, levush, is a concealed one. And even though kelim, we also said, are rooted from the makif. He said earlier that the energy comes down to the container. Why? Because the container is rooted in makif that's higher than the immanent energy. Right? So it says like it's where we are. So in truth, now he's going the other way around. Kelim are also fundamentally concealers, and they also cover and conceal the energies. Nevertheless, because their creation is through a process, an orderly process and progression, which comes through the eris. Because from the thickness of the energy of the light comes the container. That's why they are commensurate to the energy and they reveal the energy. He's adding a whole dimension here that he's not discussing here. Remember, the kalim at the end of the day are kalim and they're not eris. The whole point of the kalim is really to conceal something. But the kalim themselves, as they emerge, don't begin being a coarse container that conceals. They will become that as the diminishing continues. In other words, diminish enough energy, diminish the kalim of atzilus, and you end up with kalim that are empty and dark in this world. But the kalim, how they emerge like an embryo. They emerge subtly. First, they're subtle. So when they're subtle, so even though kalim fundamentally are helim because they come from makiv, but the actual state of kalim in atzilus are still a subtle oyer, like a transparent channel. It's a beautiful idea here. It will later become much more coarse, become a grab guf like we have. But at earlier stages, the kalim are far more subtle. So he's just qualifying everything he's been saying here. So when we say kalim atzilus are sefirot and behiris, we're saying not the aspect of the conceal that ultimately they're going to become. Right now they're in a state of sefirot and behiris, and they illuminate. They will ultimately become kalim that are very, very dark. That's why that's the definition of kalim. That's what he's saying here. That's why they're commensurate to the energy and they reveal the energy. And the emergence of the garments in an orderly way. He says, if that's the case, so why are they not like levushim? Because yeshlem ishu ma'kelim. You can say that the garments and how do they progress and how do they emerge? That's through the kelim. The kolish also say ha'alom is ma'kelim va'giluyim ha'eris, because the whole hishtalshlus, the entire cosmic order comes. Ha'alam has come from the containers. Containers conceal, and energies reveal. The giluyim come from the energies. Because a container is a container. It contains. Energy transmits. Well, Li is the Cloaks is the Vekus. And being that the general cosmic structure and the orderly progression of containers is not in a form of Dvekus. We learned earlier. The Kelim are not cleaving to the energy. They don't go to the source. They go downward. That's why the creation is through in a form of infinite distance. And the levushim become concealing forces. Even the garments of atzilus, even though they're divine and complete holiness. So you hear the paradox is going on here. Unbelievable. He's saying like this: Kalim of atzilus, fundamentally all kalim come from a concealed place. And they're concealers. But the way they progress and they emerge through the air. It's like the neshama grows, the soul grows through, the body grows through the soul. So at the early stages, the body then is very transparent. Where do the levushim come from? They come from the kalim. Kalim are fundamental concealers. So the levushim, when they emerge as concealers, not as revealers. So even though the paradox is kalim fundamentally are concealers, but since they're coming from the energy, they're at this point they're still revealing. Levushim come from kalim, so even in atzilus they are concealers, even though they're complete kedusha. Need more explanation, but I'll let me just finish.
Good.
And with much hishtalshlus, he continues. This is after the parentheses, with a extensive progression and evolution. Alavushim, and with many layers and layers upon layers. Yesh behem tevara b'levushim. They actually assume good and evil. In atzilus, they're kedusha. They assume good and evil. B'levushim the yitzira v'asiyah. Because in bria it's rubei tev, but in yitzira and asiyah the garments already now are good and evil. V'hei malimim mastirim legamri, and they completely conceal and cover up.
Not the kelim, the
levushim. Kumay hamazolas, the kelim also are going down, but they're still Kumay hamazolas, like the mazolas, like we spoke about the stars. Like I said earlier, they completely conceal on divine. To the point that to the naked eye, it could appear that their transmission is with their own power, as we said. You can worship them. And that's why we have people who worship the sun and the moon. When in truth, they're only like an axe in the hand of an axeman. Keneda, as it's known. That's because, but that is only because they conceal and cover up very much so. Mashenken the containers, even in Asiya, are complete kedusha. We still need to understand. So, what's the change of a kelim of Asiya compared to kelim of atzilus, which we'll discuss and we'll go through. Kitzur. An example of all this in atzilus is that kelim megalam ha'er. Containers reveal the air, like the body, and like the body, and like the faculties of the soul, not the garments. Gamma kelim the malchus magalam. Also the containers of malchus. Even though malchus is misper, containers are also a sefirah. Like in creation, malchus of atzilus, on that level, it's aware, it's apparent and aware that it's coming from the divine. Infinite divine. And that's why for Malchus alone, there couldn't have been a creation of an actual yesh, of substance, an actual ego of substance, an independent entity. And definitely the levels higher than Malchus. From the level of Teildus Mole Vav, meaning with a Vav, that's where you have the Gilead and Sof, the divine. Vav is meaning the Sefirah is higher than Malchus. At the Vav. The Gamze Adei Malchus, that also comes through Malchus. The Kedem Achet HaYes Sefirah became a Ma'amiti. Because before the sin, all the 10 spheres were in their true place, so Malchus was also higher. Matan Teira Atzilus was revealed below. This is what Sefirahs mean. They're Tikunim, they are the ornaments, the repairs, you could even say, Aval, and they're the illuminators and the enhancers of levushim, that atzilus kamei levush hachashmal malim alasesfiris. But the garments of atzilus, like the levush of chashmal, that level called chashmal, conceal on the spheres. V'shoshem ha'makif u'bishtalshlus ma'kelim. Their root is the makif, and in the shtalshlus, in the progressive order, they come from the containers that are concealers. V'savas ha'kelim b'sei the shtalshlus u'meha'er. And the creation and the formation, the progression of containers in the shtalshlus is from the energy. It's very eloquent, this whole structure. The root, but how do they? They're it's like the paintbrush is the one that brings it. It's rooted there. That's why it's rooted in concealment. But it's produced through revelation. If the guf came, if Hashem put a neshama in a guf after you were born, the guf would not be a real keli to the neshama. That's basically this way. It creates a relationship that the keli appreciates the oyer and the oyer appreciates the keli. Coming from Adam, right? Yeah, in a certain way. That's why in the kristalshlus, that's why in the cosmic order, levushim, the garments conceal completely. Mashenkim bekelim da kol kedusha. In contrast, the containers where everything is kedusha, holiness. Okay, we did chapter 106, page 204 and 205.